close to a year ago, in May 17th, 2020, I went to North Carolina. And there was about a 10-hour trip, and on the way we stopped at a cemetery, went through a heavy snowstorm, and drove through beautiful towns and saw the grayish blue tints over the cities, and we watched beautiful sunsets. I remember getting a tea from a donut shop. I believe it was Dunkin' Donuts, and we were seeing beautifully run down restaurants. During the last hours, we drove through the dark, sharp green lights, illuminated tunnels in the mountains we were driving on. Very long stretches of road, listening to our favorite bands on the radio. Mindless self-indulgence around the time of that experience. Extremely enlightening, with the lightness of my lungs breathing in the fresh and clean air of the mountains. Everything felt surreal and enriching. I had a plan to place DJ Screw CDs all the way down, since I have enough DJ Screw material to last for a few hours, but that plan was abandoned as soon as we hit the road. I still kept the CDs until I finally flew back down on my own. The day Lil Peeps and Charlie XCX's collab leaked. Around the same time Pachinko's full album finally dropped. When we finally got home, I remember meeting a longtime mutual friend who is close to my friend who took me down to her house. I'd like to set the utmost respect to up front, even though we were on fractured terms, but I wouldn't send negativity their way at this moment. The friend was playing a newer console and a game I had personally never seen, a newer multiplayer game. I think I remember they shared some of their THC wax just to ease the nerves of driving all night. And then we all fell asleep shortly after. The first night was rough. Their cat was really aggressive and had high amounts of energy. And that night it kept running up to me and hitting my couch I was sleeping on. And they slept in their bedroom towards the back of the house. When we woke up, I believe this was the day we saw the town. North Carolina is beautiful. It's big and full of life, with healthy amounts of mythos and grittiness, protests, murder spots, and just generally its uneasiness. We drove past places we would go to later, like Orbit Video Store and the local arcade. Sometime during the day, we took back the car to the dealership, and I helped out with that. We might have picked some baby formula that day, but the errands were also kind of just at the back of the agenda. The DVD store was great. I saw DVDs I've never heard of before, which actually led me to some new people who are mildly affiliated with the DVDs, like Uncle Goddamn. But I also found some weird DVDs of material like Everything is Terrible and Cat Soup, which is absolutely brilliant of a film based on a comic strip, sort of a tribute to the original author. I also picked up, I also have pictures of all the films like Vermilion Pleasure Night. I also got a glance of the Psychic Bible from Genesis Peorage, who I was really into at the time, like The Early Bird. I was listening to those recordings. I remember my favorite moment of the time was going into the tea store and seeing the beautiful green and blue lights inside a closed bar down the street near the parking lot we parked in. That store was closed and the lights were really beautiful. We walked into the tea shop and we were conversing. We saw a nice family enjoying some food. I'm pretty sure they were weirded out, but I thought I just personally enjoyed that positivity. They had a really strong aura, and I just appreciated it. We eventually left and walked down to the arcade and played Pac-Man, and then mostly played games in the basement. Everyone was really having fun there. I drank a little bit of alcohol since it was free, but it was generally I avoided everything. I felt more like sparkling water that night. Wasn't really heavy into alcohol at the time. In the arcade, I spoke to Liz on the phone to calm her down. She was really upset that night, but eventually I calmed down, spoke to some people around the lounge arcade area outside. They talked about old workers and old employers and some odd experiences. I talked about the entity that resides in our house, the flying objects, moving items in the room. They're kind of overwhelmed with the idea. I don't know if they were overwhelmed with disbelief or what, but I might write about it in the future. Yeah, just it was a weird conversation, but it was pretty nice. It wasn't too heavy, you know. I remember really enjoying their company. They were all really great people, but I have no contact with any of them, though. The conversations were as manic and unorganized as the trip, or as manic and unorganized as my life. Expect the unexpected. During the last trip, the last days of our trip, we actually went to a mall and I ate some chocolate thing at Barnes & Noble's. I also seen some really weird typo shirt, Virginity Raucous, which really didn't make any sense. I wish I bought it, but I did take a picture. Really ironic, what's it called? Typo. There's a really beautifully, brightly lit jewelry store and a nice spirituality type store. Asheville was really known for its spiritual scene, but yeah, it's really weird. It's more of a corporate aesthetic of kind of like hippie culture. It was really overpriced, in my honest opinion. My friend got a massage that day while I watched their baby, and I passed up on a $12 massage. I honestly wanted to justify it by saying I didn't have the money, but I was just really anxious of the store. I wanted to move on. I met a person who could cook for us in the last days. Really good cook. And I also met drug dealers, and I tried Molly, MDMA. But surprisingly, it was a mostly sober trip. I didn't really like alcohol at the time, nor weed, so I didn't really do anything. The original plans initially came for me pitching in $20 to $30 for some mushrooms and just chilling with my friends while their other friend watched their baby. The baby wasn't involved, you know, they had caregivers at the time. And the very last days was the most unexpected. I took offense with one of the friends, and I was on a call yelling about how I was unhappy about the position. A manic buildup from anxiety of leaving with no plan and little money. I was kicked out at the same moment. I was brought back in after I was waiting for an Uber, and I had to rent a room for a night at a local motel. The Uber driver shipped my stuff back, but I'm out in an inflatable bed from the initial stay at my friend's home. I also left cassettes, a few for them that I was going to give them anyway. I got to the motel, and the front desk person was an old bitter man who saw me come in an Uber, and he accused me of being a squatter. And I was trying to reassure him that I would be out the next morning because I really wanted to get home at this point. I'm not going to squat, you know, in a motel in North Carolina because at that moment it was really a purgatory. I stayed in bed until I realized my charger was missing. I called the driver, but she didn't pick up. I had to walk to the nearest gas station with the motel having a broken lock. It just barely opened, and it was really scary to leave. I couldn't use the grocery app because I didn't see any delivery driver. The one I had was a no-show. And this is where the story of the Pachinko album comes into play. That night, learning of Pachinko's new project, finally having a high-fidelity version, and the Kicking Cars EP, I gained the courage to do everything, you know. It really affected me. I think that was a really great album, and I really wanted to see it. So I slept for a few hours right after I learned of that. Took an Uber to an airport. I talked with him about like mysticism, religion, and West Coast philosophies because he was from the West Coast around California. And he was an older man who, had a lot of like stories from those days, and really interesting guy. We worked on like opposite wavelengths, but kind of similar. And I took an Uber to the airport, sat through 2 long flights on the cheapest planes I could find. I brought aspirins before the first one, and I ate small foods, like donuts, and I had a Perrier. The flights were awkward, but every moment closer to home was exciting, of course. And I finally landed in Indiana, and that's when we went with Liz back to her home, and she got me a rose and a peach Perrier with some dark chocolate. And then I believe that was the time we went to a restaurant, one of those Western themes. I saw some guy, and we were talking about Americana, and he told me that he owned the business, and it was pretty cool. And yeah, we drove home, and we've been home kind of ever since. I mean, we've left for other places in the meantime, but yes, I haven't been that far south since.